At my promotion party, I planned to announce my pregnancy. Instead, my partner clinked his glass, smiled, and ended our relationship in front of everyone. He didn't know what I knew. 2 months later, he was standing in the rain outside my apartment, drunk, yelling my name like a ghost who suddenly realized the living don't wait forever. But let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Vanessa Cole, I'm 34, and up until that moment, I thought I had a solid grip on life. I'm an architect in Seattle, not one of those Instagram architects who post latte art with blueprints in the background, but the kind who actually stays up until 2 a.m. refining load calculations and drainage solutions. Glamorous, I know. I'd been with Miles Brennan for 3 years. He worked in marketing, freelancing for boutique fashion brands and curating a lifestyle, as he liked to put it. He was charming, handsome, always the loudest laugh in the room, but he also made people feel seen. He made me feel seen, at least in the beginning. By our first anniversary, we'd moved into a modern loft just a few blocks from Pike Place. Exposed brick, 2 little closet space. Rent that made my accountant physically wince. But it was ours. Or at least, it felt like it. We talked about the future sometimes, in vague, pretty brushstrokes. Buy a house. Travel the Amalfi Coast. Maybe kids someday. He was more concerned with appearances, though. The kind of guy who picked restaurants based on interior design, not the food. The kind who thought candid photos required ring lights and retakes. I should have seen it coming. About 4 months ago, I started waking up nauseous. My body felt like it was working overtime while my mind was stuck on a 5-second delay. I thought it was stress, or maybe the flu. It wasn't. I peed on a stick in the office bathroom during lunch and stood there, stunned, while 2 pink lines bloomed like a cruel joke across the window. I sat on the toilet lid for 30 minutes before I even moved. I didn't tell Miles. Not right away. I needed time to process, to think, to breathe. Instead, I told Imani, my best friend since college, who now worked as an ER nurse. She showed up that night with Thai food and a bottle of wine. I didn't even need to say it. When I passed on the wine and reached for ginger tea, she just raised an eyebrow. Okay, she said gently. Is it something you're ready for? I don't know yet, I whispered. But I think I want to be. She nodded. No lecture. No fear. Just support. That's the thing about Imani, she never forces anything, just makes space for you to figure it out. As for Miles, I thought I'd tell him soon. But then I got news of my promotion after years of being overlooked by partners who barely noticed my designs. I was finally being elevated to lead project architect for a major waterfront development. It felt surreal. So I made a plan. We'd already scheduled a party to celebrate my promotion, a rooftop cocktail night with coworkers and close friends. It seemed like the perfect time to share both victories. My career and the new life quietly growing inside me. In hindsight, it was naive. Reckless, even. But back then, I thought we were a team. That whatever happened, we'd face it together. The weeks leading up to the party were strange. Miles was distracted. He started working late again, glued to his phone during dinner, brushing off my questions with vague mentions of client emergencies. I chalked it up to stress. He always got like that before pitching new clients. I didn't press. I was too busy hiding my morning, all-day sickness, too caught up in baby name lists I never meant to start writing this soon. The night of the party, I was full of hope. I wore a navy blue wrap dress that cinched just right at the waist and sparkled a little under the rooftop lights. Imani gave me a quick wink when she arrived, her way of saying, "You've got this." But as I looked across the room at Miles, laughing too hard at something Sierra, his old PR friend, was saying, my stomach twisted in a way that had nothing to do with pregnancy. Something was coming. I could feel it. I just didn't know how brutal it would be. The rooftop shimmered under strings of warm Edison bulbs, laughter rising in soft waves against the night sky. From the outside, it looked like everything was perfect. Inside me, A war zone. I'd spent the last hour forcing down sparkling water, dressed up like champagne, counting the minutes until cake. That's when I'd make the announcement, nothing big, just a quiet toast, maybe a mention of new beginnings. I'd even rehearsed it in my head. But fate had other plans. Around 9 p.m. As the playlist drifted into soft jazz and the crowd began clustering near the dessert table, I caught Miles out of the corner of my eye. He was tapping his glass with a butter knife, that telltale sound that demands attention. My stomach dropped so hard it could have taken the elevator down. "Everyone," he said, voice smooth like a marketing pitch, "thank you for coming tonight. It means a lot to Vanessa. To both of us." He looked at me then. Smiled. That smile I'd fallen for wide, sure, practiced. I've had the privilege of standing beside Vanessa as she rose through the ranks, building literal skyscrapers from the ground up. She's brilliant. Tough as hell. Inspiring. I blinked. My hand drifted toward the hidden ultrasound photo in my purse. Was this a proposal? And that's why, he continued, pausing just long enough to let the suspense build. "I think it's time we stop pretending we're happy." A beat of silence. Then gasps. "I'm leaving, Vanessa," Miles said casually, like he was announcing an Uber had arrived. "We've grown apart. I need something different. I deserve something more." And just like that, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small square box. The kind that usually holds jewelry. He handed it to me with both hands, like he was offering a gift, not a grenade. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a note. Folded once. Handwritten. "I'm done. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You'll be fine, you always land on your feet. Your things will be packed by Monday. Please don't contact me." My breath caught. He'd planned this. He printed this. I looked up. The mask had slipped from his face. No warmth. Just blankness. Calculation. "Miles," I started. But he cut me off with a dry laugh. "I figured this was the cleanest way. Everyone's here. No messy aftermath." A few people chuckled, nervous, confused. Others just stood frozen, drinks halfway to their mouths. Then he turned to the crowd, gave a quick two-fingered wave, and walked out through the sliding glass doors like he'd just dropped off a pizza and was late for his next delivery. No one moved. No one breathed. Imani was the first to react. She stormed across the space and grabbed the note from my hand. Her mouth dropped as she read it. Then, without a word, she wrapped an arm around me and glared at anyone who dared to look like they enjoyed the show. The rest was a blur of whispers and buzzing phones. I don't even remember if anyone clapped. I just stood there, blinking, clutching my stomach, not because of the baby, but because I'd never felt such shock crash through my spine like that. I hadn't even told him I was pregnant. I hadn't even announced it yet. And now? Now I was the abandoned woman in the center of a rooftop party, dress perfect, smile broken, future in pieces. I could feel their eyes. Pity. Confusion. Some, I swear, were trying to get better angles with their phones. I don't know what possessed me to do what I did next. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was pride. But I straightened my shoulders, took a deep breath, and picked up the cake knife. "I think we all still deserve dessert," I said, slicing the lemon lavender cake Imani had brought, my favorite. "It's not the end of the world. Just the end of something that clearly needed to end." I handed the first slice to Imani, then another to Mr. Leung from my firm. And then I kept going, passing out sugar and silence like I hadn't just had my heart torn out in front of 30 people. Mariah Carey played softly in the background. I couldn't decide if it was ironic or cruel. Sierra, the woman who'd been glued to Miles' side all evening, vanished about 5 minutes later. Claimed she felt sick. Right. The rest stayed, unsure whether to offer condolences or pretend nothing happened. Most settled on awkward silence and wine. By midnight, the rooftop had emptied. Only Imani remained, refusing to leave. I collapsed onto the couch inside our loft and finally allowed myself to fall apart. But even as the sobs came, hard, full-body sobs, I held onto one truth like a steel anchor. He thought he ended the story tonight, but he didn't know who he was dealing with. The next morning, I woke to the smell of cinnamon and strong coffee. Imani, barefoot in my kitchen and wearing one of Miles' old t-shirts she'd found in the laundry basket, was acting like this was just another lazy Sunday. But her eyes kept darting toward me, checking my expression like it was a lab result she didn't want to interpret too quickly. "Try to eat something," she said, pushing a plate of French toast toward me. "You're not just feeding yourself anymore." I managed 2 bites before nausea kicked in. Not from the pregnancy. From the memory. The note. The silence. The way he smiled like he was proud of it. I didn't cry again. Not yet. I felt suspended in this cold, calculated calm, like my heart had filed an emergency injunction against all further emotional outbursts until further notice. And in that stillness, I did what I always do when I feel powerless. I started planning. While Imani cleaned up, I opened my laptop. Not for Pinterest nursery boards or baby name research. I had bigger priorities. Evidence. Timing. Strategy. 2 weeks earlier, I'd found a password-protected file on Miles' shared tablet while looking for design sketches I'd emailed myself. Out of sheer boredom and a little suspicion, I'd guessed the password, Miles 2020. Not exactly Fort Knox. Inside? A spreadsheet. Dates, times, and expenses. Dinners. Hotel bookings. Jewelry purchases. None of which had ever made it to me. There was even a tab labeled Sponsorship Leads, Sierra C, with bullet points. Make it official before Q4. Leverage breakup for exposure. Pitch podcast. Navigating new beginnings. It wasn't just cheating. It was premeditated betrayal, monetized betrayal. I took screenshots of everything and saved it to a hidden folder titled Structural Engineering Reports. Miles never checked those. Next came the text messages. I'd seen snippets before on his Apple Watch while he was in the shower. Flirty emojis, weekend plans I hadn't heard about, inside jokes that made my stomach twist. I hadn't said anything back then. Part of me didn't want to believe it. Part of me was scared he'd say, "Yes, it's true," and then I'd have to deal with the fallout. Well, now I was dealing with it. "Imani," I said, turning the laptop toward her. "You need to see this." She sat down beside me, her mouth dropping open in stages as she scrolled through each page. Her hands clenched into fists by the time she reached the podcast notes. "Are you kidding me?" she hissed. "He's trying to brand the breakup?" I nodded. She leaned back, arms crossed. "So, what's the move?" "First," I said, clicking into a document I'd started in the middle of the night, "we secure my financial footing. I'm freezing the joint credit cards, calling the bank to take my name off anything we co-signed, and changing all the online passwords." "Good. Then I'm meeting with a real estate attorney tomorrow to get my name alone on the lease." "Good. And after that?" I looked her dead in the eye. I disappear from his narrative. No dramatic posts. No reactions. He wants a storyline. I refuse to give it to him. Imani stared at me for a moment, then let out a low, impressed whistle. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." We spent the rest of the day backing up documents, making calls, and drafting a list titled, "What Miles Doesn't Know." At the top, 1. I'm pregnant. 2. I have screenshots. 3. I'm 10 steps ahead. By Sunday night, I felt more in control than I had in weeks. Until the text came. "Miles, I'll be by tomorrow at 7 to get my things. Make sure you're not there." The sheer audacity. I stared at the screen for 5 full minutes before typing a single word. No. That was it. No explanation. No negotiation. Just a firm, final no. He called immediately. I declined. Then I called Deshawn. My work friend, who was built like a linebacker and had the patience of a golden retriever, unless someone crossed him. He agreed to come over early, along with Victor, who'd just gone through his own messy breakup and was itching for an excuse to throw someone out. I didn't want drama. I just wanted safety, distance, control. By the time I went to bed, I had 3 alarms set, a list of contingencies taped to my fridge, and a new folder on my desktop called Nico Prep. Because if there's one thing I learned that weekend, it's this. I may not be able to control other people's actions, but I will never again let someone else write the story of my life. Miles showed up at 6:59 p.m. the next evening. He was punctual. If nothing else, wearing his smugness like cologne. He probably thought this was going to be another scene where he played the victim, spinning tales to whatever audience he assumed was still listening. Except this time, there was an audience, and they weren't on his side. The loft was quiet, but far from empty. Deshaun opened the door, his massive frame filling the entryway like a drawbridge that wouldn't lower. Victor stood just behind him, arms crossed, face blank. Imani was perched on the arm of my couch, scrolling through her phone like she had nowhere better to be, except I knew she was documenting everything. And me? I wasn't there. I was having dinner at a quiet sushi spot 2 blocks away, eating tempura vegetables I could barely stomach, checking my phone every 5 minutes in case something went sideways. Spoiler, it did not. According to Imani's play-by-play texts, Miles walked in like he was expecting a press conference. He immediately asked where I was. Deshaun answered, busy. You've got 20 minutes. Miles tried to play it cool. Said something about just wanting to collect what's his. Victor handed him a single suitcase, the one I'd packed the night before. Just clothes, toiletries, and a copy of the lease termination letter I'd drafted. The rest of his stuff? In storage. He'd get the key when I decided he'd earned it. He didn't take it well. He actually started pacing. Imani texted, like he was rehearsing a TED Talk called Why Everyone Should Feel Sorry for Me. He tried to bluff, said I couldn't keep his things. That legally. That's between you and the storage unit, Victor had cut in. And your lawyer, if you have one. Miles's face turned a dangerous shade of red. Is this a joke to her? He demanded. Imani, God bless her, leaned forward and said, No, Miles. You were the joke. Then she walked him to the door and held it open with the same energy you reserve for taking out the trash. When I returned home later, the air felt lighter, like the walls themselves were exhaling. His presence was gone. Not just physically, energetically. That night, I finally allowed myself to move differently in the space. I rearranged the living room, pulled down the gaudy print he'd insisted on hanging above the couch, some overpriced pop art that had never matched the room or, frankly, my taste. I lit a candle, lavender and cedarwood. My favorite. I sat on the floor in my bathrobe and stared at the ceiling, hand resting on my belly, where a life no bigger than a plum was growing quietly, blissfully unaware of everything. This is your home now, I whispered. We're starting over. The next morning, I called the bank and froze our joint credit card. Then I opened a new checking account in my name alone. I spent the rest of the day researching Washington state tenancy laws. Thanks to some very specific clauses in our lease and a solid email paper trail, I could legally petition to have Miles removed as co-tenant due to abandonment and breach of verbal cohabitation agreements. The cherry on top? The building manager loved me and had always quietly despised Miles for parking in the guest spot and talking too loudly in the lobby. I also scheduled a consultation with a lawyer named Darla Moreno, a former family law litigator who now specialized in high-conflict separations and co-parenting agreements. I found her through a Reddit post titled, How I Survived My Narcissist Ex with Legal Receipts. Darla had kind eyes and a spine of steel. After I told her everything, the public breakup, the pregnancy, the hidden credit card statements, the fake podcast pitch, she just nodded and said, Good. We're going to stay 10 steps ahead. And that's what I did. I worked. I went to appointments. I took my prenatal vitamins. I walked past the empty side of the closet and didn't flinch. And I didn't tell Miles I was pregnant. Not yet. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about strategy. About making sure that the next time he tried to script a scene, I would be the one holding the pen. 2 weeks after the rooftop betrayal, my silence cracked. It began with a text at 8:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. Miles, Vanessa, we need to talk. It's important. I stared at it for a long time, debating whether to delete it or burn the phone entirely. Instead, I took a breath and typed, "Me, say what you need here." His reply came seconds later. "Miles, can we meet? Just talk? I feel like there's unfinished business." I laughed. Out loud. In the middle of Target. I was standing between baby wipes and a wall of onesies that all somehow had dinosaurs on them. Unfinished business? That's what he called it. But something in me wanted to see him. Not to reconnect, that ship had been torched and sunk. But to confirm, face to face, what I already suspected. He was unraveling. So I agreed, under my terms. Me, tomorrow. 2 p.m. Cafe Luna. Public. No surprises. The next day, he showed up late. 5 minutes, then 10. I was just about to leave when he finally walked in. He looked hollow. His once-groomed stubble was edging into scruff territory. His fitted jacket hung looser on him than usual. He ordered a black coffee but barely touched it. "Thanks for meeting," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I have 20 minutes," I replied flatly. There was a long pause before he spoke. I regret how everything went down." I blinked. "You regret ambushing me at my promotion party? Or planning it weeks in advance with a printed breakup note and a PR strategy?" His eyes widened. "Wait, what?" I smiled coldly. "You're not the only one who knows how to collect receipts, Miles." He fumbled with his cup. "Look, I didn't mean for it to happen that way. I thought it would be cleaner. Like taking out trash?" I said sharply. "No. I mean, ugh." He sighed. I was overwhelmed. Sierra said. "Ah, there it was." I leaned in, still blaming other people. "I see." His face twisted. "I just want to talk. Really talk. Then talk." He hesitated, then asked softly, "Is it true?" I tilted my head. "Is what true?" "That you're pregnant." So that was it. The real reason for the meeting. Not guilt. Not regret. Fear. Someone must have said something. Maybe one of our mutuals had seen me at the pharmacy or noticed I'd stopped drinking at events. Maybe Sierra had guessed. I didn't confirm or deny it. Instead, I asked, "What would you do if it were?" He sat back, suddenly looking smaller. I don't know. Exactly. That's when I placed a sealed folder on the table between us. Inside, a copy of the ultrasound, the due date, a medical summary, and a draft parenting agreement from my lawyer. His eyes widened as he opened it. "You've already prepared?" "Yes, because this isn't just about you anymore, Miles. And you lost the right to be in charge the moment you turned my life into a performance." He looked up at me then, genuinely startled. "I never meant to hurt you. But you did." The words sat there, solid and undeniable. "And what now?" he asked quietly. "What happens next?" I stood up and picked up my bag. "What happens next," I said, "is entirely up to you. You can either step up or stay out of the way. But this child will never grow up thinking that humiliation is love." I walked out of the cafe without looking back. Later that night, he texted me again. "Miles, I want to do the right thing. Please give me a chance." I didn't reply. Not yet. Because wanting to do the right thing and actually doing it are two very different games. And this time, I was the one keeping score. I didn't respond to Miles's text that night. Or the next. Instead, I did something far more productive. I attended a prenatal yoga class. signed up for a local support group for first-time single mothers, and bought the crib I'd been eyeing online for weeks. Not because I was nesting, but because every decision I made without him was a quiet act of reclamation. Miles sent 2 more messages over the next few days. Miles, can we talk again? I'm serious about being involved. Miles, I know I messed up, but I still want to be part of our child's life. Still want, as if his presence were a gift. As if fatherhood was a hat he could choose to wear if it matched the outfit of the day. I left them unread. Then on a rainy Thursday evening, I got a call from Imani. "You're gonna want to sit down for this," she said. My heart stuttered. What happened? I just got off the phone with Mary Saul. She works front desk at 8th and Vine, the design firm Sierra just got hired at. I knew where this was going before she said it. She heard through the grapevine that Miles got fired 2 weeks ago. I blinked. Wait, fired? For what? Creative fraud, she said. Apparently, he tried to pass off someone else's branding concept as his own in a pitch to a fashion startup. They found out. There were receipts. He was escorted out. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That explained the new desperation in his tone. It wasn't just guilt anymore, it was survival. I should have felt vindicated. Triumphant, even. But all I felt was tired. I sat in the quiet for a few seconds, listening to the rain tapping the windows like polite ghosts. "Thanks for telling me," I finally said. "Are you okay?" Imani asked gently. "I don't know," I admitted. I thought I'd be dancing on his career grave. But all I feel is numb. She was quiet for a beat. "That's not weakness, Vanessa. That's growth. You don't need his downfall to feel powerful. You're already building something better." That weekend, I ran into Sierra. At the farmer's market of all places, arms full of wildflowers, face like she'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. We locked eyes. She flinched. Then, to my surprise, she walked over. "Vanessa," she said, voice low, hesitant. "I owe you an apology." I raised an eyebrow. "That's one way to start." She looked down, then back up. "He told me you were toxic, controlling, that you didn't support his career. He made it sound like you were this cold, joyless woman who just wanted to tie him down." I said nothing. I believed him, she admitted. And then, I lived with him. For 10 days. That made me blink. She laughed, dry, bitter. He couldn't cook. He had credit card debt I didn't know about. And he started using my laptop to finish old projects he hadn't completed because, quote, "no one checks deliverables anyway." "So you're done with him?" She nodded. "He left yesterday. Took the last of his stuff. But before he did, he cried. Not because he was sorry, but because his podcast sponsors dropped him and he didn't know how to pay rent." I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered the rooftop. The note. The laugh. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "I know it doesn't fix anything," she added. "But for what it's worth, I think you were the best thing that ever happened to him. He just wasn't smart enough to know it." I gave her a polite nod and walked away, cradling the small swell of my belly with one hand, picking up a carton of strawberries with the other. That night, Miles texted again. "Miles, Sierra left. I lost my job. I'm losing everything." And then, moments later, "Miles, please, can I just see you? Just once." This time, I responded. "Me, tomorrow. 11 a.m. Main Street Cafe. Sober. On time." Because I needed to look him in the eye, not to give him hope, but to show him what accountability looked like. And this time, he wouldn't be the one walking away. Miles arrived at the cafe 5 minutes early. That alone would have been shocking, but the rest of him, even more so. He looked small. Not physically, but in energy. The man who once sauntered into every room like he owned the light now sat with hunched shoulders, 2 days stubble, and eyes that had finally learned what consequences look like. I walked in wearing a soft gray sweater dress that barely concealed my now visible bump. I caught his eyes flicker to it, then back to my face. I didn't smile. "Vanessa," he said, standing awkwardly like he couldn't decide if we were shaking hands or hugging. I slid into the chair opposite him without a word. A beat passed. "I, got you something," he said, pulling a small box from his coat. It was wrapped, a clumsy ribbon taped at one end. I didn't reach for it. "What is it?" I asked flatly. "A journal," he said. "Figured. I don't know. For your thoughts. Baby stuff. Or whatever." I pushed it to the side of the table. "What did you want to talk about?" He exhaled slowly, like he'd been hoping for a warmer start. "I guess I just wanted to apologize. Properly. Without a script. Without the show." I crossed my arms. "Go on." "I was a coward," he began. "And selfish. I thought leaving publicly would make me look strong. I thought it would give me control of the story." He glanced at the bump again. "I didn't know about the baby." I said nothing. "I swear I didn't." He added quickly. "If I had, You what?" I cut in. Would have left more quietly? Waited a few weeks and humiliated me at someone else's party. He winced. "I deserved that." I leaned forward. "You deserve more than that, Miles. You deserve every single consequence that's come your way. The job, the podcast, Sierra. I didn't do those things to you. You did." He didn't argue. Just nodded. "I don't hate you," I said. "But I also don't forgive you, not yet. Maybe not ever." He looked down. "But I'm willing to co-parent," I continued, voice steady. "Under clear terms. Legal terms. With structure." He looked up. "You'd really let me be involved?" "I'm not doing it for you," I said sharply. "This baby deserves to know where they came from, even if it's complicated. But I will not tolerate chaos. You want to be a father? Earn it. Show up. Consistently. Respectfully. Financially." "I will," he said, voice thick. "I'm trying to. I enrolled in that parenting class you sent me. I've been job hunting every day. I signed the child support papers. I'm even reading baby books." I raised an eyebrow. "Baby books?" He smiled weakly. "There's a whole chapter on diaper rash." "Who knew?" I almost laughed. "Almost." "What's her name?" he asked suddenly, glancing down again at my belly. I tilted my head. "Who said it's a girl?" He looked up, startled. I let him sit in the awkward silence for a moment, then finally said, "Zuri." His eyes softened. "That's beautiful." "She will be," I said. "And she's already everything you're not: innocent, hopeful, new." He nodded, tears forming but not falling. "Can I be there?" "When she's born." I took a slow sip of my tea. "That depends," I said, "on whether you can keep showing up like this, quiet, steady, unarmed." "I will." I studied him. "You say that now. But Zuri doesn't need a part-time hero. She needs a father who won't fold when things get hard. Who doesn't vanish when it's inconvenient." "I want to be that," he whispered. "Then start today." We sat in silence for a few moments. I finally picked up the journal he'd brought. It was plain brown leather, unmarked. Inside was a note. "For your thoughts. For our daughter. You were never the problem." I just couldn't see past myself. I closed the book and tucked it into my bag. No smile. No hug. But something had shifted. I stood up, pulling on my coat. "I'll message you the next appointment. Don't be late." He stood too. "I won't be." And this time, I believed him, not completely, but enough to leave the door cracked. Not for him. For Zuri. Because she deserved a father who tried and a mother who never settled for less than the truth. Zuri came into the world on a cold, gray Thursday morning. It was exactly 3:42 a.m. After 27 hours of labor, 2 emotional breakdowns, and 1 regrettable attempt to eat spaghetti between contractions. She arrived screaming, full lungs, tiny fists clenched, already a fighter. And in that moment, Nothing else mattered. Not Miles. Not the rooftop. Not the note. Not even the betrayal that had once consumed me. Just her. This little human who somehow made it all worth surviving. Imani was by my side the entire time, hair tied up, eyes fierce, snapping at a nurse when my epidural wasn't kicking in fast enough. She held my hand through the worst of it, whispering things I'd never remember, but somehow kept me going. Miles showed up at hour 18. He stood awkwardly at the door, clutching a teddy bear bigger than the hospital bassinet. Imani raised an eyebrow and gave me a look. "You good with this?" I nodded. He didn't say much at first, just hovered in the corner, eyes darting between the monitors and my face, looking more terrified than I felt. But when Zuri was placed on my chest, warm, slippery, perfect, something in him cracked. He cried. Not performative tears. Real, snotty, ugly crying. And for once, he didn't try to hide it. "Hi," he whispered, kneeling beside me. "Hi, baby girl." Zuri blinked at him with unfocused eyes. She didn't know who he was yet. But I saw something in his face shift, an anchor drop, maybe. A kind of stillness I'd never seen before. Maybe, just maybe, this was his beginning too. The first few weeks were chaos wrapped in love. Zuri was loud, demanding, absolutely uninterested in anyone's sleep schedule. She hated swaddles, loved the ceiling fan, and somehow pooped right after every diaper change. Classic overachiever. I moved into survival mode, nursing every 2 hours, Googling baby rashes at 3 a.m., crying in the shower once a day just to reset my brain. Miles visited 3 times a week, per our agreement. He never stayed long, just enough to hold her, bring groceries, or sit silently while I napped on the couch. He asked questions. He learned to warm bottles, to change diapers without gagging. He brought baby books, then actually read them. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. And that meant something. One afternoon, about 5 weeks in, I caught him standing in the nursery doorway while Zuri slept. He was staring at the mobile, the one with paper stars and clouds I'd made out of recycled magazines. "She's lucky," he said softly. "Because I glued paper to string?" I teased. He shook his head. "Because she has you." I didn't respond. Compliments from Miles always felt like puzzles, things I had to twist and turn to figure out if they were genuine. But this one felt real. Weeks turned into months. I returned to freelance work, remote social media consulting for a green startup recommended by Sergio's cousin. It didn't pay a fortune, but it paid enough. And I could do it while Zuri napped, wearing sweatpants and a spit-up-stained t-shirt. Miles found a new job, lower profile, more humble. He signed the final co-parenting agreement, never once arguing the terms. He even joined a local dad and me group at the rec center. And then there was Eli. Yeah, the grocery delivery guy. It started with notes in the bags. "Try this for gas relief," or "This one has organic carrots on sale next week." Then came jokes. Then coffee. Then a walk around the block while Zuri slept in the stroller. I wasn't looking for anything, but somehow he became the first person to see me, really see me, not as broken, not as someone rebuilding, but just as me. We're not a couple. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But we're something. And that's more than enough for now. On my birthday, exactly 1 year after the rooftop disaster, I threw a small party. Nothing fancy. Just friends, cupcakes, too many balloons, and Zuri in a pink tutu she hated but tolerated. Imani made a toast, naturally. To Vanessa, she said, raising her glass. Who rose like a phoenix, except with less fire and more burp cloths. Everyone laughed. Even Miles, who stood by the doorway, holding a tiny camera and trying not to cry when Zuri gurgled in his direction. After the guests left and the dishes were stacked in the sink, I sat on the floor with Zuri in my lap, watching her tiny fingers curl around mine. "I promise," I whispered, "you'll never wonder if you were enough." Have you ever had a moment where everything fell apart, only to realize it was the beginning of something better? Tell us in the comments. Glowing star, what part of Vanessa's journey hit you the hardest? Glowing star, and what would you have done if you received that note on your birthday?